So welcome everybody. Welcome to our Governance Made Easy webinar today, titled How to Be a Great Board Chair. Today we are hosted by the lovely Giselle McLachlan with Steven Bowman and Julie Garland McLellan, and my name's Sean McDonald. I shall be your moderator for the next 45 odd fast minutes. So firstly, thank you for attending today. We always appreciate the effort you make to be here for our live events. During the session, if you have any questions, as I said, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We will not have time to answer these during this session, but we will be having a follow-up session after this webinar where we will attend to all of those questions. And finally, if you stay through till the end, which of course we hope you will do, and as is very customary for our webinars, we have a special treat for you. By answering our 1-minute survey at the end of the webinar, you'll go into our draw to win one of our beautiful gift hampers. For those who are not too familiar with Board Pro, we are a board software provider and we serve just over 32,000 users across the world, and we enable organizations to prepare for and run their board meetings more efficiently and effectively with clever software, with less time, and deliver more impact and value for the organization. And as much as we are a board software provider, part of our wider mission here at Board Pro is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement for all organizations, but especially those organizations with resource constraints. And these free webinars and the many templates, the hundreds of templates, guides, and white papers on the Board Pro website are a great tangible example of how we look to achieve our mission. And you can find all of those resources, funnily enough, on the resources page of our website. Today, we are joined by, as I said, Giselle McLachlan, Steven Bowman, and Julie Garland McLellan. Because we have limited time, we are not going to go into introductions, but I'm sure the three of them are very well known to each and all of you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Giselle.
Thanks, Sean. Greetings, everybody. Kia ora koutou in Te Reo Māori, the language of the Indigenous people of New Zealand. And a special warm welcome to everybody to this session. It's a first webinar, I think, of 2026 for Board Pro, and we're delighted to have a huge subscription. As Sean said, we're going to keep things really tight today. We welcome and we will be informed by your questions today, but we won't be answering them in the session. Stephen, Julie, and I are united in our commitment to getting through all of our content to help you to be a great board chair, and we're going to be working as a team today. So we'll get underway. First of all, how we've decided to go with this topic first because we think every board, big or small, every organisation, big or small, deserves to have a great board chair, and that board leadership is so important to good governance. We're here to help management get more out of their chair. We're here to help chairs to do a better job, whether you're of a board or a committee. And we're going to shine a light on just some aspects of the role, as you'll understand. 30 to 35 minutes of content can't tell you everything, but let's tell you plenty of useful things. And we'd like to just get to know you all. So I'm going to ask Sean to run the very first poll of 3, just to find out who's on the call. While he does that, greetings, Fitu, and to all other colleagues that I've got on the call. It's so nice to connect this way if I haven't seen you yet this year. So first poll, which best describes you? There's a lot of options out there. Kia ora, Jane. If you could answer one option, please, for your purpose in being on the call. And I'll get Sean just to leave that open for a few more seconds while we engage with the results, and then that will help Julie, Stephen, and I just to tailor our answers a little. Okay, let's close the poll and share the results. Who have we got? And we did have that option, I hope, of being a director. Not quite, maybe as explicitly as it should have been, but what have we got? So multiple chairs or chairing a board or a committee, so that's 49, 59. So 60% of the people are actually chairing at the moment. And I want to put special call out to those people who are having their arm twisted, because how often do we hear, hey, I'm the chair because someone twisted my arm? Nice, that's been really helpful. So we're talking mostly to people who are already chairing. Let's carry on. Thanks, Sean. So in terms of our starting point today, we really wanted to anchor the session to the fact that a key job for a great chair is to make sure you're using some rational, relatable governance framework. And we've chosen the ISO 37000 model today because it's an international model, and so many of the people on the call are in different jurisdictions. So if you may find as a chair that you've joined a board or you've taken on the chair role and there isn't a governance framework in place, and we just want to encourage you straight up, if there isn't one, please get one, make it a relatable one. And actually some work that the three of us did together with Sean last week was, what's the most common framework? And it was either this one or your local country's institute's good governance framework. So yeah, I think it's a really good place to start. I'm going to call on Julie just to talk about why might you choose this one, and what about a framework that has purpose at its heart?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely fundamental. If you don't understand what the organization was created for, what its purpose and role is, it's very hard, even if you have strategies that are creating value. There are so many different strategies you could have, but understanding that fundamental purpose. And for some organizations, the purpose doesn't change. For some organizations, you'd really love it to change. I love the Cat Protection Society, who start their purpose statement with, "One day this organization won't be necessary." What a wonderful thing. And then it goes on, because every cat will be a wanted cat. And some organizations, the purpose changes. It started as a family business and an enterprise, but over time, as people have decided that they want to pursue other things, it's turned into a pure commercial enterprise, maybe bringing in outside share. But understanding that purpose as chair means that you can then enroll or enlist the rest of your board in delivering it. And that then provides the boundaries for your strategy.
Nice. And look, let me give you a little thing you can use here as a chair. So here's something I use when I'm doing workshops, and I do occasionally when I'm chairing, is ask everyone to close their laptops, don't look at the website, don't look at the papers, but on a post-it note, write down what our purpose is. And then they have to read that out to the rest of the board, and you'll be astonished by how different the answers are. And just a reminder, if we've got a purpose, that we need everyone to know what it is and use it, bring it to life. Stephen, what about on the right-hand side of purpose, the strategy? How important is that for a chair to lead?
Well, one of the key roles, if not the key role, is for the board to actually create the future through the choices and decisions that they make. And for the chair to keep everyone focused and have and collect the insights and wisdom from their colleagues around not just the content of an issue, but the strategic implications going down maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but actually encouraging people to think outside of the day-to-day, or even outside of this next 12 months, and look at future potential implications so that we can start to put in place things that get us ready so that no matter what the future throws at us, we're going to be in good shape. And that's the gift of any good chair, being able to collect that wisdom of their colleagues.
And as you've said, get us away from that 12-month or 12-week or even 12-day thinking. All right, so here's a model that at Grounded Governance we've developed to help chairs and boards to understand their responsibilities. This isn't about purpose or strategy or anything else, but it's actually about the board's own work. Now, this model we developed after a New Zealand regulator report on the financial services sector. So some of you will know this as a governance thematic review done by the FMA and the Reserve Bank. And what they did was give their financial services chairs a serve. to say you are doing way too much of this planning and thinking in your own heads. You're not involving the rest of the board in it, and you're not documenting it properly. So that was a really fascinating piece of work about 2.5 years ago now, I think. And because the report is pretty comprehensive and relevant to actually many governance environments, I've turned it into a picture to try and help people. And what it says is that the board has a healthy life cycle or an unhealthy one if you're not doing the work. And you need to think about how this life cycle shows up at your organization. So they're all going to be very different depending on so many factors, as Stephen and I would say. That slide is just, unfortunately, I apologize, thanks, Mark, that the slide is slightly cut off. So I'll read to you what it says around the bottom. So after your skills matrix refresh, there should be training and investment in people and the board as a whole. And then we need to do some work together before we evaluate how we're going. So at the bottom there, you'll see this when you get the slides, train and invest and work together. So the point for the chair is that you need to lead how this life cycle shows up for your organisation. So do we elect or appoint new people? When we do, then we start the life cycle. Some organisations, local government, for example, show up every 3 or 4 years, depending on your election cycle. But for many organisations, you've got people coming on and off the board all the time, and you have to go back to 1 o'clock and start all over again. So we hope this just is a way of shining a light on the fact that these things need to be led by the chair, but not a dictatorship. They actually have to bring it all, this discussion, to the board, some of it in board-only time and some of it in public, if you like, or board meeting time. So hopefully that's a useful diagram. It'll be more useful when the slide is not cut off. All right, let's flick on again to another model. Thank you, Sean. This is a model that I've developed again, and this is based on academic research supplemented by experience. We call this our 5 T's of great chairing model. And you can see in the center, the 5 bubbles showing you the key roles of being a chair to think about, which are time, tone, talent, teamwork, and traditions. Or in New Zealand, you might say tikanga of the board. You'll see those bubbles are then surrounded in yellow with the 3 P's of people, paperwork, and processes that you need in your governance system, bringing it all together and emphasizing that for a chair at the outer ring in blue, your work shows up in 3 very connected but separate phases, which is during the meetings, before and after the meetings, and then between meetings. And I think those 3 phases are, as I said, connected, but you have to think about them differently. How you chair during a meeting is often the focus, but actually that's so affected by how you prepared and what you've done since the last meeting. So just remembering that done well, a chairing role is about 2 to 3 times the amount of work of a conventional director's role. So a great chair is going to make all of this look very easy, often invisible. But this webinar is trying to help people who might be struggling or just want to remind us how big the job really is. So we're going to just look at another layer to it on the next slide. So is the chair leading externally to the organisation as well? And favourite 2 words, it depends. It's absolutely true. So what we've done with the model here is add that grey layer on the outside of whether you have external roles as the chair. And the reason it's grey is because this is a real grey area. It could differ, and Julie would back me up on this, it could differ between who the person is, what talent they have, what particular skills they bring to the topics on the slide. Like, are you representing the organisation externally? Are you a role model for the organisation's stakeholders? And do you have specific stakeholder responsibilities or not? Does your organisation need to be doing lobbying, and are you the right person? Do you have a national presence or an international presence as the chair? And is there anything else that belongs in the role? Julie, help us out.
Yeah, I love this because we often see people getting very prescriptive and saying the chair should speak for the board and the organization, the CEO should speak for the business. And I don't like black and white. Green and white's so much better. But I actually think that you need to look at who you've got in those roles, what are their skills and capabilities and capacities, as well as what are their preferences, and rejig them every time those incumbents change or every time circumstances change. The example I use often is Transfield Services, which is a big listed company. You'd expect them to have fairly plain vanilla governance, and in many respects they do. But at one point, they had a CEO who was a fantastic CEO, but very introvert. And they had a very controversial phase where they took a contract from the previous incumbent, which was the Red Cross. And there was a bit of a furore as to why was a for-profit organisation taking work away from not-for-profits. And although that was a business issue, the chair actually spoke because she was much better under pressure in front of a camera than the CEO, who was really very introverted, and when asked a hard question would go into himself and think like introverts do. But on camera, that looks shifty. So knowing who your people are, and I think people really are at the middle of being a good chair and making these good decisions.
Yeah, and just before we move on, I just want to acknowledge the comment or the question, sorry, that we're not going to answer, but just going back to our slide under the anything else, then that the stakeholder relations and communications and messaging could be extremely important. Consistency from the boardroom is extremely important. So I'm going to move us on to the next poll because we just would like to understand. We should have a poll next, Sean. Whether your board chair has an external role or not. We really wanted just to grab some data on that from the 400 odd people who are here. So do you or your board's chair have an external leadership role? While you are answering that, kia ora, Simone, I just wanted to acknowledge the comment made about how useful it is to have diagrams, because some of us learn that way. We think in pictures. So yeah, that's why I've done them, because some people need that rather than a big long report. Okay, let's close the poll and see what have we got. Yes, it's a big, so a third. So yes, 71% of people is a yes. So that's a really, really interesting piece of data. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. We're going to move now to the model, the 5 T's, and we're going to start with time. So vitally important. Comes up most often from people who are struggling with chairing that how do they finish meetings on time? And my answer is always, well, that's a recipe around the board table. Everyone has a role to play, and you only finish on time if you've carefully planned the time in the first place and you've moderated the behaviours in order to really maximise both contribution and efficiency. So it's really hard. I would certainly own that I can struggle from time anxiety myself. I've normalised that. So big picture, when you're planning time as a chair, it starts well in advance when you're thinking about your board's annual work plan, and not just the calendar of how often we meet and where and for how long and what's logistics, like is this online or in-person meetings, all of that, but also what work do we do in each meeting? What's a logical flow across the year or even 18 months? I do see some very good thorough board and committee combined calendars that have got an 18-month work plan, which I personally really admire and probably still aspiring to implement. So you've got the time in the meeting, but it blown out to what's in this meeting and why, and does it all make sense? Julie, what's your tip to help a chair to manage time well?
I think one of the first things, I love to have a 15-month rolling program, because it takes you beyond your current time period and it stops people cutting off their thinking at specific points in the year, and therefore opens you up to being slightly more strategic. I also think part of the job of the chair is to get the board members' contributions. And that means, as chair, you're spending a bit of time reining in the extroverts like me, making sure we don't talk too much, but also, and this is counterproductive, counterintuitive, but drawing out the introverts. That might take time, but it's an investment, not a cost. And so, as a good chair, you need to be managing your people's balance sheet as well as the P&L of their contributions, and making sure that you're really thinking through, who do I use and what's the best way to get the contributions from them in this meeting, in the next meeting. I'm a big fan of touching base beforehand. I'm a big fan of questions on notice and no questions in the 48 hours before the meeting. If you haven't read your papers before then, you haven't got much time for thinking about what's in them. So again, instilling those disciplines, and I think chairs have to have discipline as well as engagement. What do you think, Steve?
I think time is one of the biggest issues, because time is just a construct that we use often as a justification for doing or not doing something. And one of the roles of the board is to make sure that their directors know that anyone who says I was too busy or I didn't have the time is actually saying I'm choosing not to. And that clarity of thinking can help really bring people back into the fold again, so that they're actually choosing to create the time, not trying to fit it into other things. And so this notion of time as a justification, I think, is a very powerful mindset to be aware of. And the red flags are always, I didn't have time, I was too busy, I'm a very busy person. And we all know that, if you give something to a busy person, they're going to get it done. And they never see themselves as busy. They just get it done. So this notion of time, I think, can be used as a weapon by some. But the chair's role in all of this is to recognise that time is actually just what we're choosing to put our attention on. Giselle?
Yeah, nice point. And I think the other thing I would say is that a critical factor in allocating time well is making sure that management deliver papers or information, if I can say that, on time too. So this is a recipe across the team around the board table. It's not all on the board members. All right, a lot. We could have, by the way, a 45-minute webinar on every one of these T's, and maybe Sean will ask us to do that. But for today, let's keep going quickly through the 5 T's so we can get to the rest of the content. So, tone of of any board led by the chair is absolutely critical. And I'm going to begin with the fact that the tone should reflect the organisation's desired values and behaviours. So don't say one thing on your strategy, Stephen spoke about that, and then show up differently, disjointed, if you like, in the boardroom. It's absolutely critical. And I've put these words on the slide again. This comes from a piece of research, but I really want to encourage you, what tone do you want your board to bring to all that they do, not just the meetings? So yeah, I think I've given you some things to aspire to. Don't try and do all of them at once. And if you've got an inefficiency problem, then focus on being more efficient, and so on. A common challenge for boards on tone is that there can be 1 or 2 people who really disrupt the tone through behaviour, lack of alignment. Not the new people who might make their most effective contributions actually early on, but we do need to slow down to speed up, and I would just make sure that with to get a positive tone, that you really focus on a good induction so that people can be as effective as possible, as early as possible. So, values, behaviours. And then the other thing with the tone is that you as the chair must not be the dominant voice. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, but make sure you're leading the process, not the opinions of the board. Stephen, I just want to ask you, what happens if you've got a really inappropriate tone? What does the chair need to do?
So the key thing that most chairs don't do is that they don't address it straight away. So one of the big things is if there's a tone that's being set that is disrespectful, or if it is someone who's just not listening and they're bringing up their agenda time and time again, the chair has the option of ignoring it or actually dealing with it during that meeting or after the meeting. What we've found good chairs do is that they address it during the meeting, address it after the meeting, and address it for the next meeting, so that it's not actually left up to chance. One of the things we often find is that people are just way too polite. Now, polite doesn't mean, the opposite of polite is not rude. The opposite of polite is saying what needs to be said when it needs to be said in a manner that people are willing to receive it. And so the key thing is, if we see something that is starting to set the tone in a way that is combative, or you feel like someone's going for the jugular rather than the issue, then there's many ways you can bring it back to actually looking at what the issue is rather than the personality or the annoyance that someone might be feeling. So do it straight away, do it after the meeting, do it before the next meeting, and recycle that.
Yeah, because
Giselle?
everyone's looking at you to sort it out, right? Okay, we're going to move to the next slide, which is the talent, the third T. And I love this quote. I will just explain, for those of you who are not from Aotearoa, New Zealand, the word mana at the end of the quote. So mana is respect, authority, influence that person has. And so the quote is all about it. If you can show and make the most of someone's talent, you will enhance their mana around the board table. Mana, by the way, is given, not taken. So someone can't increase their own mana. It has to be done through others. So as a chair, you have a real responsibility, I think, to make the most of the talent, which is growing in two directions. The first is the CEO relationship and all that encompasses. And the second is your own board team. And by the way, just for the purposes of the webinar, CEO includes a general manager or operations manager or day-to-day person, whoever it is who's running your organization, which is not the governance role. Those of you who are putting comments in the chat, if you have a question, can you throw that into the Q&A rather than into the chat, by the way? Okay, I want to look at the CEO aspect of talent first and ask Julie just to comment on that, please.
Yeah, I think one of your jobs as chair is not to manage the CEO. The CEO reports to the board, but the board, because they can't all turn up every time, the board delegate to the chair to manage the CEO. And ducking that delegation is never a good idea. I like to see at least weekly a catch-up. It might just be a phone call. Hi, I'm hiking around Central Otago at the moment. How are you? How are things going back at the ranch? Or it might be I know you're working on this. I'm going to come in at this time. Let's sit down and go through it. You use the vehicle that's appropriate for the conversation you need to have, but letting it go more than 7 days without saying hello, I find usually is strongly correlated with a disaster.
That's a really interesting measure. I haven't heard that before. So let me just give a visual here again. So when we're with that CEO relationship, CEO and chair, I talk about this as the two-lane highway, the formal talent management piece and the informal. We're going to go back to the slide. Sorry, Sean. The informal is all that stuff Julie was just talking about. And then you've got the formal on behalf of the board piece. What about Stephen, when that bit goes wrong? Then I'm going to come back to the talent of the board.
I would say that probably 1 in 3 CEOs that I talk to when we discuss their relationship with the chair, 1 in 3 would say, look, the chair is very engaged. Unfortunately, they see the headquarters as their office, and they come and they sit down. And I'm not quite sure what they're there for. And the advice I would always give there is there's nothing wrong with the chair coming into the office if there's a purpose behind it, and I know what that purpose is in advance. And so having those conversations, it's great to have chairs walk around the premises at times, but there's a purpose behind that. So just be aware, and that's the only reason that's occurred is because the chair and the CEO haven't actually talked about, not delineations. That's a bit too black and white. But when you come in, give us a bit of a heads up, and let me know what issue you'd really like us to focus on for this particular meeting, because your time is, I'd like to get as much out of your time as possible. Mm-hmm. So when it goes wrong is where the chair feels as if they have to do their walk-arounds and find out stuff, and that's all very useful. But it should be done in conjunction with it should be done with the awareness of the CEO. Now, where there's a problem
I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there because I want to come to the other side of this talent piece, which is the talent of the board members. So the CEO social contract needs to be right. But what about the talent of the board members? And I'd want to just do a call out to all chairs, all 60% of you on this call. Make sure that every board member has some kind of development plan or conversation with you about where they want to grow and what you're going to do about it, and how you're growing the capability of the board as a whole. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide, and we're going to whip through this teamwork slide. I'll explain the model to you briefly, and then I'm going to get Steven just briefly to talk about committees. So the model we've developed to get away from the conventional governance thinking that the board sets the tone from the top. The board doesn't. The board and management together, side by side, lead an organisation. And so this diagram is trying to show that, and the flow of information that must happen in that teamwork. That's what the arrows are all about. And that teamwork is led through the nexus of the chair and CE together. We've just talked about that. So that's what the picture is trying to show, teamwork across management and the board together. But what about committees?
Sorry, what was the question, Giselle?
Just how do committees fit into teamwork? Why do we have them, and how does that flow of work show up?
Yeah. Board committees are the workhorses of the board. They're the ones who actually do a lot of the heavy lifting, and they'll be the ones who will go deeper into something and make sure the processes and policies are in place. And as part of that, typically they need to be reminded that they are there for a particular purpose rather than trying to create work. I've seen, some of the worst committees I've come across are ones that are called strategic committees, because they try and reinvent what it is that their purpose is as an organisation, as a committee. So the key thing with committees is that they are there to provide the support, the verification, to do the heavy lifting, but their audience is always the board. And so therefore they need to be realising when they're providing reports to the board, they shouldn't just give their board committee minutes. They should also say, here are the elements that we want raised to the level of board discussion. as
so
part of their board minutes.
our big call out for today is make committees effective at their job and not a lot of other stuff. All right. Also, just a little nudge for board chairs to remember that you don't chair the committees. Generally speaking, someone else has the chance to shine there. All right. Final T slide is traditions. And this is where the chair's role is to both uphold and evolve the way we do things around here in this environment. So I really want to ask chairs to pay attention to this, and I've got several suggestions for traditions you might like to look at afresh, reconsider. So they are: when do you have board only time? The answer is regularly. Before or after the meeting, separately, whatever, I don't really care, but you need to have that. Have you got the right mix of how often you meet online and how often you meet in person? And sorting out the mess that is hybrid meetings. I just want to give you that responsibility. And finally, we've already spoken about this with Steven's nudge about site visits or visiting the office. Your engagement. What are the traditions about engagement with the wider team, not just the management team? And finally, how do you hold your AGMs? Man, that is a tradition that could really be refreshed across the board. So what such a wasted space. I want to then just ask, we're going to do one more poll before we come to our final topic. So the poll slide, Sean, please, which is, we want to know what else you want to know about in relation to board chairs. So
if I could mention, there's possibly another T that's not there, which is training.
Comes under talent.
Comes under talent.
Yep.
Really important. Nobody's perfect at the time they join your board, and your job is to move them closer to perfect over the time they're with you.
Yeah, exactly right, Julie. So let's just finish off this webinar poll. You can select more than one option in the poll. So if you want to answer more than once, we'll give you another couple of seconds. And thanks very much. We've said comment in the chat, and we're already seeing some comments come up there. That's really helpful. Thank you. So let's close that poll now, Sean. And I'm going to move on to our final slide, and we'll look at the outcomes later. So leadership styles, which is basically what we're coming to. So let's see. Difficult board members, half the people. Yes, we thought that would be the case. Okay, I'm going to close that, and let's go to the final slide. So we really emphasize this about how to be an effective chair and an excellent chair in the pre-materials. And so we've come up with some topics that we think really matters, that a chair needs to show up as their best selves. This is so important. So first of all, coupling together neutrality and still having opinions. I've already talked about this very briefly, but I talk about the fact that chairs need to be Switzerland in their chairing, but be opinionated in their directorship. Those two things are quite different. And the question is when a great chair reveals their opinion. And the answer is not often. You shouldn't have to, because a well-chaired meeting, it will be very obvious when you agree with the flow of discussion and when you don't. So just remember, please, great chairs don't open discussion on a topic with their opinion. Don't tell the board what to think. And I also want to put a plug in for resilience. I am myself a health coach. I do give support to chairs who are struggling, and your resilience, your wellness actually does matter in this good chairing discussion as well. And I really encourage people to make sure, if you are chairing, that you have that other safe person to talk to, whether it's your personal mentor or another chair or the deputy chair. Someone's put a plug in for that. So, Steven, I just wanted you to talk about, please, how do you guide debate?
The key thing with guiding debate is frame it up first, and the board discussion paper or the decision paper should frame that up, and you as chair can actually very, very briefly remind people of the framing behind that. And then your job as chair then is to make sure that there are disparate points of view that are being addressed, and you can actually invite people. If you find that everyone's agreeing, and this is the biggest issue I find, if everyone's agreeing, then we don't need most of them. We want people who can collectively look at things from different perspectives. And one of the great challenges for any chair is to invite people to look at things not from a presupposed point of view, but what if? What are the things that would derail this? What are the other two options that we haven't considered? Where are the different ways that this could go wrong, or it could go right, or what will the stakeholders think of this? And really, the role of the chair is to get those different perspectives on the table so that we can have collectively really powerful decision making, not just someone putting their point of view and everyone either agreeing or disagreeing on it. Giselle?
Yeah, nice. And I think, Julie, the final bubble there, this learning mindset, I know that you have a view on this.
I do. And I think as directors, sometimes the most powerful thing we can say is, I'm not sure I understand that. Or I think I might be missing the point here. Because you cannot possibly join a board with everything you need to know already known. There's a word for directors like that. It's deadwood. So bringing that learning.
Tell me what you really think.
Yeah,
no, don't do that.
not whilst we're being recorded. I'll tell you afterwards. How's that? I'll ring you up and tell you. But I think getting that learning mindset and making it okay. Some of the great chairs that I've had the joy of being around, David Gonski, Graham Bradley, you mention something and they go, oh, I don't know about that. Tell me more.
Yeah, that's interesting. Exactly.
That's your learning mindset. And if they can do it, we all sure as hell can do it too.
And let's acknowledge that we're preaching to the converted here, because there's still 400 plus people on this call saying, I want to learn more about how to be a great chair. So that's awesome. I'm going to finish with an opportunity for everybody who is on the call and everybody who watches it later. We do offer a much more comprehensive view of the content we've covered today through the Board Pro Masterclass. There's a little weird looking at a picture of myself, but call out there. This is available for you to self-pace learn. And so, yeah, we recorded that in order to make all this information available. And there's a lot more tools there too over the 4 sessions. So I do hope some of you will find that of interest, and please feel free to share that. If you're on a board with a chair who's struggling, there's a resource there to help them. Sean, back to you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Giselle. Your timing is impeccable. A minute to spare. So please feel free, everybody, to connect with our presenters today, Giselle, Steven, and Julie, on their LinkedIn profile details that you see there. I'm sure they'll look forward to your connection. I'd also like to draw your attention to the wealth of webinars we have coming up this quarter. February 5th, we have Steven hosting our webinar on how to set your strategic board agenda. So that is a repeat from one we did very early on last year, which was very well received. So I highly recommend that to you. All of our webinars, by the way, can be found on our website under the webinar resource page, oddly enough. So you shall receive an email from my good self tomorrow now, which will include a copy of the recording along with the transcript and the presentation slides from today. So thank you for that. Just as you leave the webinar, don't forget to complete our 1-minute survey. You will go in the draw to win one of our beautiful gift hampers worth over $400. I'll announce the winner tomorrow on that as well. So thank you again, everybody, for your attendance. I hope you enjoyed the session today with Giselle, Steven, and Julie. I know I did. I look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar, everybody. Have a great day.